I'll talk about sustainable development goals and why it's important for us to play a part in accelerating the implementation of those sustainable development goals. Because if you understand that the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals were designed so that they can transform our world and solve myriad of problems that we are facing from the environment, planet, and then from the people. Things like poverty, hunger, lack of education, health, and also looking at prosperity to make sure that countries and individuals and societies prosper, but not at the expense of the environment. And also, when that prosperity is taking place, there's equitable access to the natural resources. Basically, the 17 goals are premised on the concept of sustainable development, where we are saying that our development must happen not at the expense of future generations. So we are saying development that enhances the quality of our lives at the moment, but also while protecting the environment and also not compromising the ability of the future generations to also enjoy their life from the natural resources and from the planet. So the concept is solid, and the 17 goals are solid, and they provide a framework that solves all the major problems that we face in the world as countries, individuals, as continents, and also as the globe. The challenge we are still facing is that there's still a very big disparity between the theory and also the practice. In many of the countries, the concept of sustainable development has not yet got to the critical mass, especially when you look at the institutions like the local authorities, cities and towns, and also in companies and organizations, where this activity that drives the sustainable development goals is supposed to take place. So there is still a very big gap between the theory itself and the application. And in some countries and in some regions, especially in the global south, like Zimbabwe, South Africa, Malawi, Kenya, Nigeria, even Egypt, even in most of the cities and towns, the authorities and decision makers are yet to integrate sustainable development goals into their local planning and also their development plans. So there's still a very big vacuum in terms of the theory of sustainable development goals. And also there's still a very big gap in terms of the theory at the government level and also at local authority level. So these are some of the challenges that we need to address, and so that we need to solve the issue so that we accelerate the implementation of the sustainable development goals, bearing in mind that we are only 7 years from our major review of the implementation of the 17 goals, and according to the latest UN report, we are only about 47%. So we are already behind the targets that we are supposed to meet. So for us to meet the targets by 2030, we need to do a lot more, especially when it comes to goals such as the climate action goal, which is a very big one and a serious one. And according to that goal, the UN says if we continue doing this business as usual, the way we're doing things now, by the time we reach around about 2030, 2050, we are going to have a temperature rise to 3.8 degrees, which is twice the target that we want to curb, because our idea is to curb the rise in global temperatures to below 2 degrees. So if we continue doing what we are doing, it means we are already going into serious trouble, because that exceeding that limit is going to bring about a lot of negative consequences and serious impacts on our development. And it has an impact on all the other 16 development goals. The other area is on waste management, an area that I work a lot on. Solid waste management is a crisis in many cities and towns around the world. And at the moment, most of the cities and towns, they are not yet at the level at which they are actually transitioning from their refuse collection and the disposal approaches, which are also called the linear approaches, to fully integrated solid waste management operations and systems, which are more sustainable and which are encouraged by big institutions such as the World Bank and also the United Nations through UNEP, United Nations Environment Program. in many cities and towns that I've worked with, they're still way ahead, the way behind, in fact, when it comes to the implementation. So there's a process that is involved in transitioning from refuse collection and disposal to integrated solid waste management. And most of the cities and towns, they are not even at the first stage of that process, because the process has got about 8 different stages. So they are not even at the beginning of that process. So they are still running the refuse collection and disposal approaches and linear, which is very difficult and very expensive, and also which does not protect the planet. And as I speak, some companies and countries are now jumping to the concept of circular economy, and they are treating it as if it's an independent concept. But the concept of a circular economy is premised on integrated solid waste management. So you cannot expect to have a circular economy before you actually embrace and you start implementing integrated solid waste management. So this is some of the things that also needs to be sorted and that needs to be addressed. So in terms of sustainable development goals, more action is needed, and we need to revisit our models and also to have new models in terms of the implementation of the sustainable development goals, because most of the models that we are using now, from what is happening at the ground, it shows that they are not working.